It is Country Viewpoint here on Flow FM, and there is a really interesting series of sessions going on online at the moment that ABARES are looking after, and it's on the back of agriculture's all-time high, $65.9 billion in production value this fiscal year. If we ever needed agriculture to have a big year, it was certainly in 2020-21. Now, a man who's been following this, he's running some sessions online at the moment for people as well, and he knows all about it. We're bringing him in now. Acting Executive Director at ABARES, Jared Greenville, joins me on the line. Jared, welcome to Country Viewpoint.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on. Now, tell us about the sessions that you are running online at the moment for various folk. Who are they for and what are they going through?
Yeah, so we've got a number of sessions going on over the next 3 days, or 4 days in total, including today, taking a look at really all the industries, what's going on, with a view to not just look at what's happened this year, but to look at some of the things that are going to really drive the sector over the next few years. So we're starting off with a big picture view of what's going on in agriculture, but then getting into things like water, into trade, into forestry, fisheries, into red meat, horticulture and labour at the moment, and grain. So there's a whole range of different things that are on.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, when we talk about things like primary production, agriculture, we traditionally think of grain farmers, obviously meat and livestock as well, but there is a lot that goes into agriculture that is also going gangbusters as well, other than just grain farming and mixed farming systems, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I think this year's been a pretty good year all round for agriculture. The seasonal conditions have really shifted into a positive state. That's boosted, livestock, grains, mixed farming. It's also, helping to counteract some of the pressures we're seeing in horticulture as that goes. And we've got some of the longer-lived investments in horticulture, particularly around nuts, starting to really come on, and that's driving a bit of production in those areas.
So when we talk about horticulture and I guess irrigation in general, I mean, it's not all bells and whistles as good as it has been. We've had trouble with seasonal workers in parts of Victoria and New South Wales. We know that in particular. Victoria has still got some issues there trying to get people to pick fruit and the like. But that's probably the only downside from what we've seen in that industry, because everything seems to be growing well. Yeah,
that's right. If you look at the sector performance over the last few years, it's pretty impressive to see how they've just built on, strength to strength as they go along. This year with the labour supplies, it's unfortunate also, there's been a bit of a turnaround in some of the seasonal conditions that there's pea producers who have not been able to get everything off and to market. But there's those swings and roundabouts, but really the fundamentals are there for that industry to continue to grow.
All right, let's talk about the nuts and bolts, though, of the grains industry. And there are some staggering figures, I think is probably the only way to put it, that have been released at the Virtual Outlook for 2021 conference. I want to talk about the second largest winter crop of 55.2 million tonnes. And there's a bit more to it even than that, isn't there?
Yeah, that's right. So it's second biggest on record, 55.2 million tonnes, but that's been underpinned by the biggest wheat crop that we've ever seen at 33.3, I think, million tonnes. So it's right up there. So it's near record. And we've been, pretty lucky to have that turnaround, particularly in some areas of New South Wales where there's been 3 consecutive years of close to zero production. Overall, the grain sector has had 3 years of production declines, given the poor seasonal conditions, and just to rebound at this level is quite exceptional.
We're chatting with Jared Greenville today from ABARES, and we're looking at some of the facts and figures that are coming out of the Virtual Outlook 2021 conference. Now, along with that, we've seen good prices at the farm gate for various product, and that is good news, whether it be meat, wool, grain. All of that has equated to a rise in projected farm income, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So combined with, more stuff to sell and some better prices, average farm cash incomes are going up and that by about 18%, which is quite a turnaround. For some areas, they're reaching, really high levels, not above the 10-year average. Across the board, though, we're looking at a return to kind of average farm cash income levels. So, while that's sounds like only average, but it is a big turnaround from what we've seen over the last few years.
Now, exports are probably the one downside. We've seen the Aussie dollar kick up a bit, so this isn't necessarily terrible news, but exports are forecast to drop a little bit, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. Exports still lag production a little bit, just given the seasonal seasons and the way that we account for it, really. And so what we're seeing is that lingering effect of the drought for our export performance. So we haven't had as much grain to sell. The other thing that's really happened with the drought is that our national herds and flocks are at really low level, at historic lows. And there's only so long you can sustain that before production starts to fall. And we've started to see that happen. At the same time, people are holding back animals to rebuild those herds and flocks. And so that's had a little bit of a downward impact on the overall export performance, despite the value of the sector going up.
So all in all, whilst there is a few little negative markers along the way, things going exceptionally well in agriculture, and we're not worried too much about those export figures. I guess the other thing that's holding them back is global logistics have been quite difficult through COVID-19, particularly the nations that we would normally export to that are really, really still under the pump with the COVID situation in their countries, right?
Yeah, that's right. So getting product to export, or getting it out off our shores, we've done pretty well with that. We've still managed to find markets and the like, but all those lockdowns and restrictions have really changed the way that people eat and the things that they buy. And so that's had a bit of an impact on price, particularly for high value products. And then we also did with lack of passenger flights. And there's been a real downturn in the availability of air freight. The government stepped in and helped this industry out through the International Freight Assistance Mechanism, but still with a bit of lower demand on those products has meant that while we're still exporting, the prices for some products are down. And so there's high value seafood and there's also high value horticulture and meat products. But the other things are things like wool and cotton. While prices aren't too bad, they're down on what we would have otherwise seen if COVID hadn't been around.
Sure. Jared, for those who'd like to have a read of the ABARES Agricultural Commodities March 2021 quarter report, it is a mouthful, but it's certainly worth having a read if you're in the industry. Where can they go?
Yeah, so go to our website. It'll be one of the first things you see. So if you just search for ABARES in Google or and jump on, and you'll see the report, and it's there to download. You can read it on screen, so we've split it up. You can look at the overview of the sector, but then we also have individual reports on different commodities. And we also have a little feature this time on African swine fever, which would be interesting for those who are in the livestock industry about where we expect China's pig herd to go and how that will influence price on over the medium term.
Excellent. Jared, great chatting with you on Country Viewpoint today. All the best with the online sessions for the next few days. And again, if people want to get along and hop onto one of those sessions, again, that ABARES website, the place to go, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. Go along. You'll find links to the Outlook conference. It's free as well, so feel free to jump in and register, and you'll get sent a link, and then you can join the conversation and see the presentations and interact with the speakers.
Beautiful work, mate. It's great chatting with you. All the best, and thanks for joining us here on Country Viewpoint.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.